a hugely dramatic effect. I do think that on the days I would take it, I would feel like I had a bit more energy. The other one I took is called retatrutide. It is the likely next generation GLP-1 drug. It's been developed by Eli Lilly, and they're in phase 3 trials right now. But it is not currently legal to buy, but people on, these peptide forums on Reddit are obsessed with it and are buying it bootleg from China. So I figured I would do the same thing that they've all been doing and try taking it. And I mean, it basically worked, as far as I can tell, just like any other GLP-1.
And how much did it cost you for a 6-month supply? How does it compare to were you to buy Ozempic or Mounjaro?
It was dramatically cheaper. From a Chinese factory, it cost me, like $13 a vial for 5 milligram vials. And similar dosages, I believe, would be in the hundreds of dollars per vial, getting that over the counter.
Do you plan to continue taking peptides?
Probably not for the rest of my life, I would say. But it was an interesting experiment.
Journalist Ezra Marcus wrote about the culture and facts behind unregulated injectable peptides for New York Magazine. Ezra, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's Here and Now.
I'm Morning Edition host Jeff Bossert. Radio IQ has concluded the Spring Fund Drive, and with your help, we surpassed the goal of $375,000 and welcome more than 250 new members. Your support ensures that we will be here to provide in-depth reporting, timely conversations, and the kind of stories that you've come to depend on that go beyond the headlines and get to all sides of an issue. To all that gave this week and all that have given in the past, thank you so much for your support.
Ali Vaez was involved with the 2015 negotiations that led to the Iran nuclear deal. He's also a nuclear scientist. A new deal was tantalizingly close late last month, so why did the U.S. and Israel launch their war against Iran anyway?
That Iran has always been the other of the West, this bellwether state that the West has had difficulty understanding.
That's on the next On Point.
Weekday evenings at 8 on Radio IQ.
Funding for Here and Now comes from the listeners of WBUR Boston and from MathWorks, creator of MATLAB and Simulink software for technical computing and model-based design. MathWorks, accelerating the pace of discovery in engineering and science. Learn more at mathworks.com. And Olin College of Engineering. They believe human-centered designs make the most meaningful impact. At Olin, students learn to work in partnership with local communities with humility and empathy. olin.edu.
It's Here and Now. Quick, who was the first woman of color as well as the first Asian woman in Congress? No Googling. Okay, hold on. Our next guest will tell you if you don't know. The guest is author and historian Kate Anderson Brower. Her book on America's First Ladies, First Women, The Grace and Power of America's Modern First Ladies, is a New York Times bestseller. And now with CBS News senior correspondent Nora O'Donnell, Kate has written a book telling of unheralded heroines who helped change the course of American history. It's titled, We the Women, the Hidden Heroes Who Shaped America. So, Kate, women like the first woman of color and first Asian American in Congress who was?
Congresswoman Patsy Mink. Yes, she was elected in 1964, and she served 12 terms.
Well, I'm so glad you're putting a spotlight on her, and we're going to spend a few minutes on her with you, because if that's not enough, she's also considered the mother of Title IX. So start with her story. How did rejection redirect her to be a champion for women?
Well, you know, her parents, she represented Hawaii for those 12 terms. Her parents came to Hawaii, which was part of the U.S. at the time, but not a state yet. They were born in Japan. She wanted to be a doctor, and she could not get into medical school. She was rejected from every medical school. Then she decided to become a lawyer, and she was one of 2 women in her law school class. And then she graduated and couldn't get a job. She couldn't get hired. So she ran for Congress in 1959 and lost. And it was because she couldn't pursue these 2 other careers that she was so talented at and couldn't do it, because she had, she faced the boundaries and the limitations that a woman, especially a woman of color at that time, was forced to reckon with. And that's why she wanted to make real change. And she certainly did.
Well, she served until her death in 2002, which, props for that and thanks for that. But talk about Title IX, signed into law in 1972. It's just 37 words that prohibit sex-based discrimination in education programs and activities that receive federal finance assistance. And again, Congresswoman Mink behind this. How did including that keyword activities change the world as we know it?
Well, it completely changed athletics for girls. Before Title IX was passed in 1972, there were less than 7% of girls participating in high school athletics. And now there's almost half of high school athletics are females. And then, it was a hugely important bill. It was very controversial. There were attempts by male members of Congress to cut it back because they were seeing that the federal funding was going to women's sports and not just to what they saw as the superior, male sports that they thought made more money, basically. And her point was everyone should have access.
Yeah. And over the years, oh my God, we've seen how this is filtered into women's professional sports, and we're watching that right now with, March Madness. But Congresswoman Mink was, as you said, Japanese American. How did that influence her work and her view of what it meant to be an American citizen?
Well, she was an American citizen by birth, but, she was alive during World War II, and we know about the internment camps where Japanese Americans were sent, and she vividly remembered watching her father burn Japanese heirlooms, and that really stuck with her because she had this dual identity, as obviously a lot of Americans have, and when she went to college, they wanted her to live in housing for international students, and that's when she started this anti-racism campaign in college. So it deeply affected her because she saw herself kind of straddling. It's something that affects so many women in Congress and beyond.
You said she saw herself straddling different worlds. Is that, we lost that a little bit. I just want to make sure we heard that. Yeah. She knew how it felt to be an outsider. You're right. Even though born here, treated that way, we remember how the Japanese were treated. Well, we only have about a minute here. Oops, are you still with us? Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm going to bring Indira in. Look, I'm not going to put you on the spot here, but I'm betting there are a lot of people now thinking, Congresswoman Mink, I want to know more about this woman who was behind Title IX, who was the first person of color and first Asian American in Congress, and maybe the name didn't come to them as quickly as it would.
Well, I wasn't even really familiar that much with her legacy, although I have to say she changed my life in the sense that I competed in girls' sports in high school and in mixed sports in college. And obviously she was able to pave the way for that with Title IX.
Well, Kate Anderson Brower, we understand you're back with us. That's okay. These things happen, but we feel like we were, through you, able to thank this woman. So thank you so much for your book with Nora O'Donnell. It's called We the Women, The Hidden Heroes Who Shaped America. Kate, we want to learn about more of them. We'll have you back. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin.
Yeah. And Here and Now is a production of NPR and WBUR. I'm Robin Young.
I'm Indira Lakshmanan. It's Here and Now.
Funding for Here and Now comes from the listeners of WBUR Boston and from the Music Emporium, guitar sellers for more than 55 years, celebrating the enduring presence of music made on the front porch and center stage. You can learn more at themusicemporium.com.
I'm David Seidel, the news director here at Radio IQ. We've wrapped up our spring fund drive, and with your help, we surpassed our goal and welcomed more than 200 new members. Whether you gave this past week or in the weeks preceding this fund drive, or if you've been a donor for years in the past, We thank you so much for your support. With your help, we'll be here in the weeks to come and with sustaining support well into the future. Thanks for listening and for your support.
Ever hear a fascinating story on Radio IQ and wish you could share it with a friend? Well, now you can with the Radio IQ app, where you can also keep up with breaking news and the top stories of the day. Download the Radio IQ app today.
You're listening to Radio IQ on WVTF Roanoke, WRIQ Charles City Richmond, WVTU Charlottesville, WVTW Charlottesville, WVTR Marion, WISE FM Wise, WQIQ Spotsylvania, WIQR Lexington, WEHC Emory, HD3 of WURV Richmond, and on 92.5 Richmond and 94.9 Fredericksburg. Radio IQ, a listener-supported community service of Virginia Tech, on your smart speaker and online at radioiq.org.
Fresh Air with Terry Gross is underwritten by the Davis H. Elliott Company, providing energy delivery services to utility.
Good afternoon. I would like to welcome Reverend Greg Hetherington and invite him to come forward to the podium. Reverend Hetherington, I invite you to tell us about your church and then to lead us in prayer. When Reverend Hetherington is ready to lead us in prayer, I invite all who so desire to stand for the prayer and to remain standing to join the board in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Hetherington.
Thank you. My name is Reverend Greg Hetherington, Associate Pastor with Melrose Baptist Church, a cooperative Baptist fellowship congregation that's located in North Roanoke County on Peters Creek Road, adjacent to Northside High School. We are a place of grace filled with imperfect people of grace who do our best to love God, to love our neighbors, to love our community. We are family focused, we are mission minded, and want to be transformational in our area. Let us pray. God of grace, love, and mercy, we thank you for the responsibility and privilege of service for the community we represent. We thank you for the willingness of our leaders to serve as the caretakers of your people and your creation. We ask for discernment and thoughtfulness, relying on your guidance and clarity as we discuss the matters before us. Grant us wisdom to make decisions that are just and honorable, and fill us with the spirit of cooperation, collaboration, and understanding. May we serve with humility and dedication. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good afternoon and welcome to our meeting for March 24th, 2026. Regular meetings are held on the second and fourth Tuesday at 2 p.m. Public hearings are held at 6 p.m. on the fourth Tuesday of each month. Deviations from this schedule will be announced. The meetings are broadcast live on RVTV, Channel 3, and will be rebroadcast on Friday at 7 p.m. and Sunday from 10 a.m. until 5 p.m. Board of Supervisor meetings can also be viewed online through Roanoke County's website at www.roanokecountyva.gov. Individuals who require assistance or special arrangements to participate in or attend Board of Supervisor meetings should contact the clerk of the board at 540-772-2005 at least 48 hours in advance. Please turn all cell phones off or place them on silent. Item A, opening ceremonies. Number 1, roll call. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Radford.
Here.
Mrs. Hooker. Here. Mr. North.
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney.
Here.
Mrs. Shepherd.
Here. Item B, request to postpone, add to, or change the order of the agenda items. Are there any requests to postpone, add to, or change the order of the agenda? Fellow board members?
No, ma'am.
Mr. Kaywood?
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the board. One thing that I will alert you to, and I can perhaps give an update at the end of this portion of the meeting, we may need to make some adjustments in the order of item J, our work session, and item K, our closed meeting. as our primary presenter in the work session is attempting to get here by air. And although I do think he made it through the TSA line, the plane is quote-unquote having mechanical issues, and he's supposed to board it at 3 for what is supposed to be an hour and 30-minute flight to Roanoke. So he is going to let me know if that in fact happens. If it does happen, we would probably do the closed meeting first and do the work session later. If he's unable to travel, we're going to connect him remotely and probably do the work session first. So I will give you an update as this portion of the meeting comes to a close, and we can figure out which item should appropriately come next to the batting order, either J or K.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lubeck?
No changes, Madam Chair.
Item C, proclamations, resolution, recognition, and awards. Mr. Kaywood? We have a resolution to recognize a Roanoke County employee for exemplary service to Roanoke County.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the board, I'd like to invite M. Portner to come forward. I was going to surprise her, but her coworkers informed me that if I did that, I would be in big trouble for a really long time. So I took their advice on that. But it's been a while since I've done an individual recognition of an employee. Of course, the last recognition we did was for our folks that worked so diligently during the snowstorm. But I thought, especially after we had our first ever McAfee Awards a couple of weeks ago, that I wanted to recognize M. She came to work for us back in June of 24 as our PIO specialist, and she has really been instrumental in opening up a whole new world of communication with the county and our social media arena. And as everyone knows, while I'm old school and do not have any social media accounts, to reach some of the younger members of our population, we have to communicate differently. And we developed a social media strategic plan back in March of 25, and again, M was instrumental in this. And since then, we've seen over a 60% increase in our number of impressions, an almost 70% increase in engagements, and the net audience growth we have has grown by almost 160%. So all of the metrics are just showing phenomenal growth. But the reason I really have brought M forward, though, is a little different than just the numbers. Her job envisions one of making a lot of content, and M certainly does that. But where she's really, I think, shown is in leading others who are doing the same. So throughout the organization, we have a variety of staff who maybe once or twice a year will do a little video clip about their work. We have some folks who have kind of taken to it and will do content more frequently. But she's kind of served as the overall organizer for that entire effort. And it's really paid dividends, because one of the things that we were told as we developed the plan was your people want to hear from your actual folks who do the work day in, day out. And one of the best examples of this is one of our most popular videos that we've had out there. It was only a few seconds long, and it was a firefighting recruiting little clip, and I think it had well over 1 million views. So this is how we get our future workforce, folks that are looking to invest in the county, look at our social media footprint. So I just wanted to recognize Em for all of her hard work, but also her leadership, where she is both a doer and a leader in the same field. So she's not competing with folks who want to make content. She's helping them to make content and shine. And I think that the work that she's doing now is going to pay huge dividends down the road as our whole media and communications landscape continues to evolve.
Will the clerk please read the resolution?
Resolution recognizing M. Portner for her exemplary service to Roanoke County. Whereas Ms. M. Portner began her career with Roanoke County in June 2024 as a specialist in the Public Information Office and was later promoted to social media manager. And whereas M. has demonstrated outstanding leadership in advancing the county's digital communications through a strategic video-first approach across platforms including Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Nextdoor. And whereas M played a key role in implementing the county social media strategic plan adopted in March of 2025, resulting in significant growth over the last year, including more than 23 million impressions, a 66.2% increase, more than 1.2 million engagements, a 68.4% increase, net audience growth exceeding 29,000, a 157.7% increase. And whereas M has strengthened coordination and collaboration across departments by supporting staff in developing engaging social media content, leading weekly virtual meetings to plan content and ensure consistent messaging, facilitating monthly in-person sessions to encourage collaboration and creativity, expanding participation by engaging staff across departments to contribute content that highlights county service. And whereas through these efforts, M has enhanced the county's ability to promote Roanoke County as a vibrant place to live, work, and do business, while showcasing the employees who serve the community. And whereas M further demonstrated her leadership by establishing the first annual McAfee Awards to recognize staff contributions to the county's growing social media presence. And whereas in addition to all of her external communication accomplishments, M has been instrumental in improving internal communications across the organization using many of the same techniques. Now therefore be it resolved that the Roanoke County Board of Supervisors hereby expresses its sincere appreciation and gratitude to Ms. M. Portner for her innovation, leadership, and commitment to strengthening communication and community engagement across Roanoke County. And further, the Board of Supervisors extends its sincere best wishes for continued success in the future.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
So move.
Second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Will the clerk,
Well, we can vote and then comments.
okay.
Comments
Will the
before?
clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Radford?
Yes.
Mrs. Hooker?
Yes.
Mr. North?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mrs. Shepherd?
Yes. Do any of my fellow board members wish to comment?
I do.
You always do.
That's right. You know, when I first came here in 2018, I can remember watching things the first year or so, and I said to the county administrator, you know, we're not tooting the horn enough. We're not letting people know who we are, what we do, and how we do it. And so over the years, it's gotten better and better and better. In fact, it's reached a pinnacle with respect to that commercial or that social media post. But we're doing a pretty good job now, and it can only get better. And I appreciate the efforts of the Public Affairs Department. And M, congratulations. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. You're good. You're looking this way. You're here at the right time, in the right place, and doing the right stuff. And you're marvelous in what you do. I mean, you've got all 5 of us engaged. You do little short clips with us. You make us feel relaxed. It's just natural for you to talk to us, and then it eases us when we try to talk back to you through a video. McAfee Awards, I could not make it, but it sounds like it was a great hit. And you're basically a mentor too. You're trying to teach your craft and what you do to others, and that's how you pass it along. So thank you, Richard, for recognizing her. I didn't know who we were going to do either today until you mentioned her name.
I wanted to make it a surprise.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, so congratulations.
That was warned.
So, Em, you have done a great job, and when I did go to the McAfee Awards, the thing that really struck me is that there were all these awards for all these great little presentations. They were informative, they were funny, they were cute, and so it draws people in, and that's what we need. We need something to draw people in, to know the good things that are happening here. So thank you. You're doing a great job.
And the McAfee Awards were great, and it was an eye-opener to me to see all the different clips from all the county employees who were engaged. And that's what I see, is somehow the engagement of the employees in that social media world that I'm unfamiliar with is really exciting. For me, though, I go back, and I can't recall when it was, year and a half ago, in one of your earlier clips where you did the Chief Poindexter, the police training where you had to run around the training facility and do it within the time limit that is required for our officers. I thought that was great. So congratulations.
Well, the biggest thing I can say is I love the little clips you do with us, because a lot of times people don't know us personally, and we're just people that sit up here on the dais and make decisions, but you make us more human. And I appreciate that, and you make us comfortable doing it, and sometimes we just have to laugh at ourselves doing it. So congratulations and thank you very much. Keep doing the good work.
Thank you.
Would you like to speak?
I mean, I'd just like to say, thank you to Richard and you all for this recognition. I know I've been at the county for, not to concern Richard, but 1 year, 9 months, and 14 days. It's been nice to see how much we can accomplish in that time and how much we can showcase the county. Obviously, the PIO office, that's our whole role, is showcasing what the county government does, what our staff does, some of our best videos with RVTV, is like showing the Bonsack Fire Station. Our best podcast was like showing the greenways. So, people really values like seeing, what we do as a government. And I feel like it's almost serendipitous that it's budget presentation day because, Richard's gonna say all the numbers, but we gotta have a way to show people what those actually mean.
Yeah, if I could just share one final thought that I should have shared when I was speaking about him in the beginning. Probably her favorite characteristic from my impression is she does not hesitate to tell me what she thinks, even if she completely disagrees with me, which I really need and I think is fantastic. So I really have respect for staff that speak their mind, give good sound advice, regardless of whether or not they think it's going to be followed, and that's just another strong characteristic. So that's been great to have up on the fourth floor. And again, she's given lots and lots and lots of good advice, and generally speaking, when I take that advice, things go well, and sometimes I ignore it at my peril. So I just appreciate all the guidance as well. All right, now we can. So we'll give you this.
Do we stand up?
Yes.
We're here. Smile. Excellent.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Thank you.
We got to do that. Gotta be kidding me.
He's got some up my
She's
heat.
got the heat on over here.
Item D, briefing. 1, presentation of the proposed fiscal year 2026-2027 operating budget and proposed fiscal year 2027 through 2036 capital improvement program. Richard Cawood, County Administrator.
So again, Madam Chair, members of the board, I'm going to demonstrate this as I start. My wife jokes with me sometimes that I have the perfect job because I get paid to talk, but unfortunately, talking this time of year is a little difficult for me with whatever is blooming at the moment, so I'm not sure which is worse, the pollen or the medications used to minimize that. So I have some coffee and a throat lozenge, and I'm going to try not to replicate Mr. Radford's State of the County address. So if I pause to drink coffee, it's not for the caffeine, but it's for the throat. But I'd like to start by thanking the team, because it's hard for me to believe this is actually my 5th time presenting a budget to the board, so time flies when you're having fun. But the small team that really does a lot of work on this is really led by our CFO, Lori Gearhart, our Director of Finance, Jessica Beamer, our Budget Administrator, Steve Elliott, and then Budget Manager, Ian Ha, and then myself. And we have spent a lot of hours working on this presentation, including a lot of time over the weekend putting the final touches. So as we get started, obviously we have to present you a balanced budget, but today also marks an important turning point in the budget process, because while it's my job to bring a recommended budget before you, after today the budget belongs to the board. So obviously you're free to make any changes you would like to see, give any staff any direction for additional information you would like, but this is really staff's effort to bring a good budget before you. But obviously we do that in a lot of collaboration with the board that really starts in earnest in sort of the early winter, late fall period. And I always say that estimating revenue is the hardest part of my job, because in order to really do this, you need to know what a car is going to cost in 18 months, what a house is going to be worth in 18 months. But this year in particular, I added to this slide expenditure, because think about what's going on in the Gulf right now. So what's oil going to cost, or a gallon of diesel, which could have a lot of pressures on our expenditures. And there's a lot of unknowns that we're going to have to watch carefully this cycle. I'm going to do the headline on this slide first. I'm unable, unfortunately, to recommend a tax rate reduction this year, given the current climate. But I wanted to give a summary of the tax relief journey that we've been on, starting in fiscal year 2023. I won't read all of this, but we've done substantial tax rate reduction. And I think given what I see going on in the surrounding communities, not having to recommend raising taxes is maybe almost as good as a rate reduction this year, given all the circumstances that surround us. And I always like to update this slide to show you the real estate tax rate journey that we've been on. You can see back in the year 2000, our rate was $1.13. We're now at $1.03. And we've done 3 years of rate reduction, and we're going to hold that constant this year. And then really to put this all in perspective, although we're not recommending an actual rate drop this year, the tax rate reductions of the past continue on into the present. So if you look at the entire window of time starting back from fiscal 22 to the proposed budget, that's going to yield almost $16.3 million in taxes that we would have otherwise collected if we had not lowered rates. And then the proposed fiscal year alone, it's almost $17 million in taxes that will not be collected, that will be left with our citizens for them to use in the economy. And that's a lot of money. So that's just based on the rate reductions that you've already done. And that's very significant. When we look at our revenue picture, it's a little more complicated. So real estate, we anticipate, is going to continue to perform really above historical norms. We're looking at a net growth in revenue of 6.61%. Personal property tax rate increase, or revenue increases, are starting to come down. That was growing more quickly, so we're estimating 2% growth there. We're estimating BPOL to be flat. We're actually estimating a year-over-year reduction in sales tax revenue of just under 3%. And I would add, and you've heard this before, we are also not going to make our projection for sales tax in the current fiscal year. So sales tax has definitely been a weak area in the economy, which just kind of shows some of the pressure our citizens are under. The bright light here is other local revenue, but the primary driver there is this is the first year that the Mountain Valley Pipeline revenue is showing up in budgeted revenue, so there's strong growth in other local. And then if you sum all that down on the kind of the gold-colored shaded row, that's the $11.9 or $12 million in new revenue we've been talking about. There's another $1 million in other revenue that is not ours just to spend as we choose, primarily intergovernmental. And the increase here is related to the additional DSS positions that we're going to discuss later. But I want to point out, though, when you look at the proposed total for intergovernmental for the whole year, it's $22.7 million. So when you look at our total budget, it can be a little deceptive because these are funds that flow through the county. They go to directed purposes, like some of the benefits that we pay out in social services. For example, if we have money from VDOT for a VDOT-related project, those all hit our books, but they flow through, and they're not local tax revenues that we have a lot of discretion over how they're spent. When you look at where that revenue is going, you'll see a breakdown. We're going to look at this several ways, but the whole budget is $285 million. You'll see, again, primarily being spent on education and public safety. Everything else is much, much smaller by comparison. I always like to spend a couple of minutes on this next slide. This is what on the previous slide was a fairly small part of the picture of support functions, but then when you look at that broken out, you'll see that IT is a significant driver in our budget, and that's primarily due to the increase in costs that we pay for software licenses and things of that nature. I would highlight the general administration portion as being less than 2% of your total budget, so you'll see this on another slide later on, but we've tried to keep this area of our budget very lean as we go through. This next slide is what we frequently refer to as budget on a page, and there's going to be a significant change we're going to talk a lot about in this presentation. Normally, you will see the largest item on this graph as being your transfer to schools. We are recommending a $3 million in reduction to the formulaic transfer to our schools this year. So that number gets very small on this page at just under or over $730,000, and you'll see the lion's share of this total is made up with public safety and general government, but that's really for employee raises for your employees is where the bulk of that money is. And again, software cost, CSA. We are funding the general government expenditure contingency in the base budget. Again, given all the uncertainty in the economy, I've got a lot of concern over our revenue estimates, and so we definitely need to have that in the base budget this year. And then the other items, you'll see the $530,000 transfer to the debt models that we'll talk about more in detail in a moment. Education has been, for many, many years, the top priority financially for the county. You'll see the $96.94 million transfer we just looked at, $13 million for debt service, and another $3.68 for CSA. And again, we're going to talk about this in more detail momentarily. And we show you this graph every year. This will be the first time that the transfer, this does not include capital, this is CSA, and the general fund transfer is north of $100 million. So this is our highest year-over-year transfer, and you can see the graph that shows the rate of growth at the bottom. So again, we're very generous with our schools, and that's relative to our other neighbors in the region as well as statewide. While it's difficult to look at a graph to compare this county by county because there's so many variables, I think especially among larger full-service jurisdictions, the amount of funding that we put to our schools is very generous and very high, and we have an excellent school system as a result. This year, there has been an adjustment to the local composite index, or LCI. And for those who aren't familiar with it, the state prescribes a minimum level of funding for schools. Now, very few school systems operate at that minimum level. But on a statewide basis, the Commonwealth puts in what they would see to be 55% of that cost at the state level, with the idea that that would be matched 45% by localities. And then every 2 years, they readjust the formula or the apportionment that they make of those funds across the various counties and other local governing bodies around the state. But the composite index it represents the locality's ability to pay for public education. It has nothing to do with what's going on in the school district or the cost for schools other than number of students. But it's based on number of students, your real property value of your community, sales tax revenues we just saw, which is down for us, and then incomes. And the wealthiest counties in Virginia have a LCI of 0.8, which either means they have a lot of money or very, very few students. So you have, I think, Fairfax City is one of the high ones, and then there's an unusual one, which is Bath County, because they have a relatively expensive real estate and very, very few children. And then I believe in last place is Radford, and then everything in between. But ours was lowered, meaning the state believed that our ability to pay had gone down, and so our school system this year is receiving an additional $2.6 million because of that. And that should flow through to next year too, because they do this every other year. But in order to provide a pay raise for our employees, we needed an additional $3 million. So the net effect of that is about a $400,000 less in revenue for our schools. While stressing that we're very generous, I definitely see that we're at a crossroads. And I'm going to go through a series of slides to paint the picture of why I think we're at a crossroads. But one point I really want to make as we begin this, we have spent countless hours trying to make sure the numbers you're about to see are accurate. They're primarily based on audited financial reports, but I will stress that one of the complexities of doing the analysis we're getting ready to look at is there's several ways to look at things, and I'm sure that other people will find different ways to look at them. So this was our honest attempt to paint a picture that I see for the county financially. And as I give the next few slides and the next few points, I want you to know that this not only represents my opinion, but that of our CFO, of our finance director, and your administration. So this is really our collective view that right now we find ourselves at this crossroads where we don't have a financial crisis today, and in fact, I would say we're in much better shape than many of our neighbors, but the current path that we're on is unsustainable as you go further out into the future. And for the county, this is especially with our fleet and heavy fleet needs. And as we presented to you in work session, I believe last summer, in order to maintain a fleet of our size, given especially the very rapid increase in heavy fleet like our fire and rescue apparatus, we should be investing about $5 million a year, and currently in our base budget, we're investing less than $1 million a year. So what that means is at some point in the future, there'll be the day when we can't collect all of our trash because we have too few trash trucks that we can put on the road, or we will have units out of service at a fire station because we have too few operable vehicles. We know for sure that day is coming. Again, it's hard to predict when because we do our best to keep things working, but we're not investing at a rate that's sustainable over the long term, in addition to some of our other capital needs. So that really presents some challenges for you, which you have four basic choices. You could have a higher tax rate environment. You could have a smaller county government with more limited services. And I want to stress, this is not fine-tuning a few things. These would be some structural changes in our budget. So lines of service that you have today that you don't have in the future that would result in substantial ongoing cost reduction. You could have a different financial arrangement with the school system, or you could have some combination of these three things to really make your four choices, because again, the path we're on is not sustainable into the long-term future. And there's some reasons for this, and I'd like to walk through some slides. So number one, we have fairly rapidly declining school enrollment. This is not a Roanoke County trend. This is a national trend, a state trend, and a regional trend. I saw an article the other day that Montgomery County, projected losing 900 students between now and 2030. So this is something that's happening. It's really a global phenomenon of significantly lower birth rates. So this has been going on really at scale for quite a few years. So peak school enrollment in our school system was back in 2008 at an enrollment of 14,820. And in the projected FY27 budget, the schools anticipate an ADM of 12,905. So that's a loss of about almost 1,900 students over the peak. And the number today, if you look across the chart back to the first year, which is 2001, that's almost 1,000 children less than what we had in public schools back in 2001. And against that backdrop, again, looking at published data, there's about 3,800 excess seats or excess capacity in the system today. So the system at the published, if it were sort of a full house, uniformly spread in just the right way, you could hold another 3,817 students. Meanwhile, during that same time window, the overall county population has grown. So back in 01, we were at 8,680, and now we're at 97,260. One thing I'm going to point out, because I think it's going to happen again, is you'll see right around the year 2000, it looks like a ski slope. There's a big jump in population. For reasons that I don't fully understand, the Weldon Cooper Center, who does official population projections for the Commonwealth, has consistently underestimated population growth in Roanoke County. So when we do a census, it hops up, and it's done that a few times. So there's something in the algorithm that kind of tends to underestimate our population. But that's over 10,000 residents in this time window. So that population growth has increased workload for the county. So that means more address points for solid waste, that's more 911 calls. So all the things that we do that are measured in terms of citizens that we serve. And then there's another phenomenon that's going on simultaneous to this that's harder to see. That 97,260 people takes up far more households than just a proportional change, because household size is shrinking. So this is partially related to the reduction in number of students in school. So there's far more two-person and one-person households than there once were. So again, that just gives us more address points to serve, which again drives cost for the county. We do have a funding formula that shares revenue with our school system, and that's applied to, excuse me, I'm going to do coffee again here. I hate this time of year. So that's applied to your net local tax revenues that we share. And it does have a factor for student enrollment and population. It has another factor for payroll that I'll mention a little bit. But it's got some limitations. First, it's a lagging indicator because we use 3-year rolling averages, so we kind of move slowly. And it doesn't consider a lot of things. So there's capital's not mentioned in that formula. LCI is not in there. There's a whole host of other things that are not in there. And then in the original agreement, it states that it should be reviewed and updated on a regular basis, maybe up to every year. And to my knowledge, that's not been done. And then there's also this thought that we always rigorously follow it, but that's not correct. So back when COVID hit, there was a sharp decline in ADM. And Roanoke County held Roanoke County Public Schools harmless for at least one of those years of drop in ADM. So we funded the schools at their previous ADM level and did not make the drop. And then there's been some sort of revenue shocks over the years that we have not fully passed on to the schools. So we've always run the calculation, but we haven't always done the transfers based on the calculated amount. So while this is probably the first time in my recollection at the county that we have recommended a lower transfer, we've actually made higher than formulaic transfers to the schools in the past. Now, this next slide is very busy, so I apologize for that, but I think it's got a lot of important information. And this is looking at what the formula is doing mathematically through time. So if you look down, as you run down the sheet, you're running down fiscal years, and you'll see the second column over is your actual transfer in dollars. So if you look at 2016, we transferred $66.8 million. If you look at last year, that was $96.2. You can see ADM falling in the third column. And then you'll see a percent that gets talked about a lot. So this is the percent of local tax revenue that's transferred to schools. And then the far right column is the transfer in dollars. So you can see that transfer in dollars has made a steady rise. But the whole reason we did this chart is actually for that second to last column. It says share in ADM per thousands. The actual number doesn't mean that much. It's the trend of the number that's important, because what this really is, and I really appreciate Jessica Beamer for coming up with a way to show this, that 3.053% in thousands is really a decimal point and 4 zeros and then 3053. And what that represents in that 2016 year is, if you looked at that local tax revenue for that year, what share went with each student in public school? And then how is that share changing? And what you'll see as you go down, you'll see that number grow. So we go from 3,053 to 3,080. We do have a little drop to 75, but then that continues to rise. And what that means is twofold. First, that transfer per ADM is growing, but it's also growing at a faster rate than the budget as a whole, right? Because if it was just growing at the same rate as the budget, that share would stay the same on a per student basis. So the slice of pie per student continues to rise, and that's important to the overall budget. And then when you look back a little further in time, as we mentioned before, 2008 was the year of peak enrollment for the schools. And if you look at that same data, so that was a $4,250 transfer per student, but that share was the 2.950, right? So significantly lower. And then you'll see the first year of the revenue sharing with the 3,085 and that number continuing to rise. So when we look at the proposed year, and we did not put this as a separate row, but if you took into account the change in the LCI and just treated that as if it were transfer from us, both the share dollars per student and the overall transfer would be the highest we've ever made historically. And even with the adjustment, even with taking out the $3 million, you'll see that it's still the highest per child transfer that we've ever made in terms of dollar per ADM. And then the actual share of the budget is higher than many of the historical numbers and somewhat consistent with them. So again, I share all this just to make the point that we have been very generous. And I think the kind of icing on the cake way to see this, if you look in 2008, that was peak enrollment, we were transferring 43.67% of those shared local tax revenues. Even without including the LCI effect, and this just happened to work out this way mathematically, we now would be transferring 39.67. So that's a drop of 4 percentage points, which sounds like a lot, but in that same time period, enrollment has dropped by almost 13%. So a 13% drop in enrollment, but only a 4% drop in the share of the budget that is going to our school systems. And again, I want to stress, that's not to say that's the incorrect number, that's just to show you the financial pattern that you're getting out of the current arrangement. When we look at capital, we see a similar effect. Again, capital is not mentioned in the revenue sharing formula. And we say that we have a shared capital contribution. And we talk in terms of sharing that 50-50. But we run the capital transfer that we make for the county's part through the formula. So this is kind of like paying for something with post-tax or after-tax income. So in order to generate our $530,000 incremental contribution, we need to generate new revenue of over $900,000. Well, the total need between the two organizations is only $1,060,000. So The effective share from the school side going into the combined capital program is about 15%. We're paying about 85% when you look at it this way. But then the debt issuance is done on a 1/3, 2/3 basis. Again, since this is not mentioned in the formula itself, it's unclear as to what was intended with respect to capital. But speaking to some of the folks who worked on it, this was probably not what they had in mind when they created it. And we see a similar pattern with CSA. You all have seen this slide or one that looks like it many times, showing CSA is one of the fastest growing portions of our budget. But CSA is also not mentioned in the formula. So we do a different arrangement with CSA that is very interesting. So all CSA costs are excluded from the formula, at least all budgeted CSA costs. And then we determine a contribution number, and these are roughly 50-50, but not exactly, for the county and for the schools. And then outside of the formula, we transfer that exact amount to the schools. They turn around and give us that exact amount back, so it just makes a circle. And that has an effect financially. It looks very much like the capital. So some revenue is lost to the schools because none of the money goes through the formula. But when you look at it just in terms of some columns here, when we look at column A, you'll see the contribution that the county made. Column B is what we give to the schools that they give back to us. Now, we do put in some money occasionally at a year end from both organizations, so that does flow through the formula. So that is money that's transferred outside of just, handing money over to one side and on the books it comes back. But you can see over the analysis period, that was about 93% county funds, about 7% school funds. Again, that's not to say this is right or wrong, but it's kind of eye-opening when you see it. There's no way to calculate the formula impact of that because there's no methodology for how you would run these funds through the formula. Do you run some of them through? Do you run all of them through? It's not really mentioned, so we couldn't really do that analysis. But again, I think the simple message is functionally today, the county pays for CSA is kind of the bottom line with this. So to kind of sum all this up, since 2008, there's been a 12.8% decline in student enrollment in our public schools. Meanwhile, the county population has increased by 7.6%. So that's a significant net change. And when we add this all together, and this was the fairest analysis we knew how to do, when you look at the formula transfer, the capital transfer, CSA, fund balance contribution is proportional to debt. So as you know, we have a 12% fund balance that we maintain. Right now, we put that in as post-formula dollars into that fund each year. That's a significant portion of our new revenue. If you portion that out based on borrowing, because that's why we maintain that fund, and then SROs, and this is not to say who should pay for SROs, but I think they're pretty clearly a service that's provided to assist with the schools. If you add that all together in FY25, almost 48% of your local tax dollars that went through your budget, budgeted revenue, was either given to or spent on behalf of your school system. And again, that's not to say that's the right or wrong number, but that's one of the reasons why on our side of the ledger sheet, we have a hard time funding things because we are, again, very generous with our school system. And this current arrangement, particularly if you assume the current trends will continue, will become increasingly untenable for the county. And the current trend that we see is continued moderate growth of county population and continued reasonably steep decline of student population. And the rate of change on the negative side for the student population is faster than the rate of change of population growth. So schools right now are decreasing at an annualized rate of about 0.8% every year, year over year over year. That rate has accelerated some at the last few years. So now back to your regularly scheduled program, because now we're back to slides you've seen before in budget presentations. Just talking a little bit about where your budget money goes and what it's for. We've talked a lot about education. Again, that's usually looked at as the center of our 5 pillars of local government. Public safety, you have recently received a presentation from both your fire chief and your police chief about continued growing demand in those two, especially the police department. The police chief has asked for a significant number of new positions that we're unable to fund this year. as the complexity of their work increases. I think it's important to point out that we've had very rapid growth in our social services workload. We do share that with the city of Salem. So when you look at people, it's always important to remember that that's a 60-40% shared arrangement with city of Salem. Obviously, we have a nice Parks and Rec and library system. And then, of course, we recently acquired Explore Park, which will be an important part of our future. And then we'll talk more about this in a little bit, but we do have a lot of development and investment activity in the county. That was behind one slide. I apologize for the audience. I'll catch up now. With public safety, as I mentioned earlier, we're recommending a 2% increase in the anchor salary for our grade step system. And what that'll yield for our employees is for the folks that are in the higher portion of the scale, they would get a 3.25% raise. And for the earlier career public safety folks, they would get a 4.25% raise. We also have additional funds in there for pharmacy costs that's been rising due to some federal changes. We're going to continue to fund the sheriff office SROs that are working part-time in our schools. And then we have software as a service. The next slide is going to be new in a budget presentation, but I put this in here because I think there's this idea in the community that our public safety folks are at the top of the pay chart of regional public safety pay. And that was true a number of years ago when we first implemented our grade step system for our public safety folks. But the market has responded, and we are now, once again, falling toward the bottom. So for new police recruit, we are second from the bottom, a little bit ahead of Roanoke City. But several of our neighbors pay considerably more. For a firefighter recruit, we're at about the middle. But I would point out, while Blacksburg may seem to be a little bit far away, those New River Valley fire departments in particular have an interest in our people. Montgomery County is adding fire and rescue staff. So while if you were working over, say, at this office, that's a long way away. But if you live in Catawba and you're looking for a place to be a fire and rescue person, the New River Valley might be just as close to you as we are. So we do compete in that labor market. For a new sheriff, we are second to the bottom in terms of our current pay. Our communications officers are in a little better shape because two reasons. First, we implemented their grade step system more recently, so we made an adjustment more recently. And then, as you can see, we didn't put numbers on all these. The salaries from top to bottom are much more closely spaced in that labor market, so we're a little more competitive there. We're recommending a 3% general pay increase for the non-grade step system employees that we have. We do need some additional funding for solid waste. There are some changes in there related to SNAP reimbursements. That's kind of a complicated topic of its own. Again, you're seeing software. And then some increases for other operating expenditures. This has been another area of general challenge, is the ability to properly resource departments for their functions. Next, moving on to positions. We are recommending 11 new positions, but I will say only one of these, and it's only half of a year worth, is kind of traditionally funded. So, based on our workload, we've had to attract some more social services people, and we're recommending that 9 of these jobs be made permanent. But it's important to note that they are over 80% reimbursed by the Commonwealth, and then we share 40% on top of that with Salem. So these are by far and away the least expensive full-time positions we have. So all 9 of these actually have about the same fiscal impact as a single typical FTE in the county. As you all heard earlier in work session, the Commonwealth Attorney's Office has some needs, and what we have programmed here is 6 months worth of one of the 2 additional attorneys that he has recommended. This is another area that if we had additional funding, we would try to beef that up. So that's the only position that's kind of a pure county-funded role from a budget perspective. And then the last one has an interesting history, but as you all may know, we use a software package that's commonly referred to as Tyler Munis to do all of our billing and the work between our treasurer and our commissioner and other staff that generate bills and receive our tax revenue. And there's a significant system conversion that is underway with that software package. And for many years, we had a member of our IT staff who was assigned just to do that had a lot of expertise. Some years ago, that person retired and moved out of state. we were able to bring them back on in a sort of a remote consulting capacity, but now that person would like to retire for good. So we need to have another long-term relationship with the person who manages one of our most critical software systems. So we would like to add this as an FTE, but that's largely offset by the savings we'll have in not paying for a consultant resource. There's, excuse me, no changes proposed for fire and rescue this year. Social services, we've already spoken about. Then kind of the other category, you'll see a change of 2 for the 2 positions we just mentioned. But I'd like to point out that kind of in this arena, the county continues to be very lean. Even today, we have fewer than we had back in 2009, and while the number has crept up very slowly, so has our population and workload. And then you can see when we sum this all up, we would have a projected strength in 27 of 1,075. And then moving on to the CIP, we'll do this very briefly because we've done this already in work session. This is not a bonding year, so we do have $8 million in non-debt expenditure proposed. And then for the life of the CIP, you'll see it's, again, a typical blend you see of cash and debt funded. When you look at the full 10 years and just how it breaks out, it's kind of heavily weighted toward buildings and facilities. Then the next 2 pieces are very similar with our capital maintenance and recurring items, and then our whole computer environment, which is everything from the servers to the access points to the hardware that sits on desks. We have our specialty equipment, and then the money that's very heavily leveraged in our transportation program, again, for a total for the period of $131.6 million. I am recommending this year that we withdraw $1.5 million in cash from the capital debt model for the purchase of a fire truck and an ambulance. I will point out that $1.5 million will actually not purchase the 2 pieces of equipment outright that you see here. It actually costs more than that. So a standard kind of pumper truck, as we would call it, the cost of that has risen to close to $1 million, if not over $1 million. And then ambulances are now well north of $500,000 with all the equipment that they carry. But we do have money programmed both in the upcoming and next year's budget to supplement that. I will point out the reason that we can recommend this withdrawal is the model is based on borrowing at 6%. We have come in less than that, so there is some available cash in the model. And these are the kind of needs that we worry about for the long term. It takes a number of years to get a new fire truck. So if the one you order today might be delivered in 2 years. Ambulances are a little bit better, but this is nothing you can just walk out and buy. So these are ordered well in advance of when you receive them. By ordering some of the heavy fleet with money removed from the shared capital program, that does free up some desperately needed money for light fleet. We have not been replacing police cars or police vehicles at the rate that we need to. So we're recommending the purchase of 12 police vehicles. They live short, hard lives. They get lots of mileage put on them. We have many encounter with deer and vehicles and all the many hazards that go with being a police vehicle. And again, this is becoming a dire need in the police department to have some fresh inventory come into the fleet. We're recommending 5 light fleet purchases. These would be more pickup truck style vehicles in fire and rescue and solid waste. The cheap ones on here, and probably the only inexpensive thing on here, are the 3 social services vehicles. Those are just kind of relatively inexpensive cars. We would like to add another Parks and Rec truck with a plow to replace some older equipment. And then 2 pieces of our turf management equipment that are more expensive than you would imagine for professional turf type equipment. And then, I won't present this slide, but just we broke out the CIP in that same format that we used for the budget summary. I'd like to stress that there's many, many unfunded needs in this request. We have lots of needs to put additional funding into our departments that we're not able to do. I will point out that you'll see the light and heavy fleet need is less than you typically see. That number has been more than $5 million in the past because we are recommending that removal of $1.5 million from the capital program and or shared debt model. And then you'll see almost $52 million in other capital needs that we really need to be programming money for as a county. just a simple one that I will mention, and this is for the maybe a little bit more distant future, but we have things like our courthouse and jail complex that are getting to be very old facilities that are going to need significant investment in the future. That's not even on the radar screen yet. So again, when you look at operating the county over the next 20 or 30 years, there are some very substantial capital needs on the horizon. Fortunately, we continue to do very well in our economic development efforts, and there's 2 projects I'm going to highlight today, both of which our staff have worked very hard on. Elbit Systems of America and Tanglewood Crossing. I will point out, particularly as I give this presentation, based on an article I saw last night, that the investment at Elbit is very near and dear to my heart. I'm not sure if the general public is aware, but Elbit, which many people still know as old ITT Night Vision, because that's the name it held for many years, they are the principal night vision manufacturer for the U.S. military. So I think there's 2 companies in America that make military-grade night vision, and I believe 1 in France, which constitutes the night vision supply for NATO writ large. And as I have a son who is currently serving in the 82nd Airborne, and I read an article yesterday about how there's consideration of deployment of the 82nd Airborne, the equipment that he trains with is made right here in Roanoke, so in the county. So that's a really good feeling. But even before the current turmoil in the Middle East, there was a strong demand for night vision, and they are making over a $30 million investment, adding almost 300 high-paying jobs to produce a very large order for the military for upgraded night vision equipment. And then Tanglewood Crossing, I'll get to watch this one out of my office window upstairs. This is a really neat redevelopment project that I think we're going to see more of its kind in the county. So this was a parcel right beside the rack, for folks who aren't familiar with it, that used to have 2 very old, simplistic, square box office buildings that had water problems. At least they seemed to when I walked through them. So they were bought at pretty great expense, torn down. And this is going to be a mixed-use development with some shopping. I'm not here to announce any of the tenants yet, but some tenants that are new to the market and some other interesting things. And we participated in this. We were able to acquire, and I can't remember off the top of my head if it was a state or federal grant, for some brownfield remediation to deal with some of the asbestos and other things that were in those old buildings to help the developer out a little bit. And it's envisioned that this project will get underway this summer. But we have many opportunities like this in the county. Long ago and far away, we were sort of a hub of call center activity, including this building that we're in now. And many of these buildings have reached the end of their useful life, but they make great commercial and mixed-use sites, so I hope to see more development like this. We certainly have other economic development. I'm only going to mention 2. The one that I get to see every day when I go home, which is the public site that is at the entrance to my neighborhood. So I'm getting to see the grade come down. I expect to see some building going up here soon. And then I would be remiss if I did not mention my excitement at the home place. I'm looking forward to fried chicken up there when they reopen. And then housing, and I always put this with economic development because I think sometimes we underestimate. We get excited about commercial and industrial things for good reason. But our real wealth and our tax base is in housing. And we've had a significant uptick in housing activity. And these are just things that have been approved through the end of the year last year and under construction, some of them today. But almost 400 new homes. We've got a similar number of townhouses. So some significant apartment activity, and we're going to talk about one of those projects in work session. But this is where our future workforce lives. This is where our community lives. And again, this is where our wealth is. We do lots of different things, but we are, primarily, we have housing. And that housing has performed very well. We have many neighborhoods that folks love to live in. As some of you are aware, we've had a new entrant into the housing market with Ryan Homes, and their development in the county has done extremely well, and I think they've almost sold everything in a very short period of time. So there continues to be strong demand to live in the county. We also do a lot of work with our schools and our industries. So we have an award-winning industry insight tour where we've been to a variety of manufacturers. We take students, we take teachers, and learn about jobs. And this picture you'll see is of Mack Truck, which was just a few years ago a startup that now has organized tours with vests and audio equipment, and very different from what we saw in the past. And then we do sort of a smaller version of that called Manufacturing Day that's been very popular. So coming down to the second to last slide and the last real slide with content, but I want to kind of end the presentation where I began, which is to say that there's certainly not a crisis, but we are at a crossroads, and I think over the next couple of budget cycles, the board's going to have to make some important decisions on which future path we want to pick. You know, again, we have these choices of higher tax rate structure, which I've consistently heard from the board. That's not the desired direction. A smaller county government that does less, a different relationship with our schools, or some combination. Now, I did put in there possibly 5, and this is kind of not something you can plan for. This would be like doing your family budget, hoping you win the lottery. We could, and we certainly try every day to attract what I would call a game-changing economic development project. So if we were able to land a multi-billion-dollar economic development investment that would structurally change our financial picture, that's something to be hoped for, but not to be planned around until it happens. So, you know, we certainly have one of those in the community right now with the Google project. Despite its controversy, it does represent that scale of project. So the projects I showed you earlier are in keeping with the scale of what have been our historical economic development wins, which have been very good. But that really leaves you with the other options. And my recommendation and the thoughts that I will leave the board with today before I show you the calendar, which is the last slide, is we would recommend that the board give staff direction in this budget cycle before you finish your budget to start working with the schools or evaluating other alternatives you would like to look at. And we need to start that now so that we go into the FY28 budget, we're starting to make some decisions. None of these decisions need to be made immediately, and they can all be phased in over time. I think the two that represent the lowest hanging fruit would be looking at how our shared capital program works financially, both in terms of how contributions are handled, but also distributions out of that fund. And I think how we handle CSA, because again, neither one of those are addressed in our funding formula, so I think that would be a place to start. We could certainly look at the underlying formula itself, but I want to close by saying I really like the fact that we have a formula. I think the formula idea is good and sound. I think it has created a strong platform for an excellent public school system. I think it has helped to reduce the level of acrimony that's often experienced between local governments and school systems. So I like the concept of it, but I think, again, for both organizations to remain strong and healthy as they need to evolve going into the future, we're going to have to make some changes because all the assumptions that were made back in 2014 have become dated and the environment has changed a lot. So my job today is just to tell you that the path we're on has a finite lifespan, but we need to start to do that work now so that hopefully we can make some smaller and more incremental changes over the next couple of budget cycles to position us for something that is sustainable into the future. And with that, I appreciate you putting up with my voice. This is the calendar for your next step. So, and as a reminder to the public, your April meeting is a little earlier than it would normally happen so that our treasurer and commissioner can do their work. In this case, it's Kevin sending out bills that need to go out. Scheduled for April 7th. Public hearing on your budget is on the 28th and then on the 12th. And then right now we have the adoption slated for May 26th. And the final word is this is all subject to change pending the state budget, which who knows if and when that will ever be settled. We understand a special session is coming. And with that, I'll be happy to take any questions, and I have the experts behind me if you ask any hard ones.
Thank you, Mr. Kaywood. Would you like to make a comment, Mr. North?
I would. Mr. Kaywood, you might want to get a stool, because while mine won't be 45 minutes like yours, it might be a little bit over 3 minutes. First of all, we're moving towards a budget. This county will have a budget before the state of Virginia has a budget. And this school system will have a budget, but it will be increased because here's how this is going to go down. I asked a state delegate the other day that represents this area, and I said, is the conferees meeting now in Richmond to talk about the budget? And he looked over and he says, here's how this is going to work. Said Louise Lucas, who's the senator on the conferee committee, and the Speaker of the House, Don Scott, who is also on the conferees committee, they're going to be talking back and forth over the next few weeks. And when they go back to Richmond on April 22nd, they're going to say, here's the budget, and it's going to be voted on.
there's not going to be a lot of dialogue and discussions because those two people that represent their houses in Richmond are the most powerful people in Richmond. And so what does this mean? The Senate version has more money for the school system than the House does. And the Senate version is going to be adopted. So look out, schools, you're going to get more money. And if I'm wrong, I'll buy you a cup of coffee. But that's the way I see it. And you're going to have even more money probably for teacher raises. And I certainly hope that that trend continues as it has in the past. Thirdly, Ms. Hooker is going to be a star again for the second year in a row. She's going to VACO later this week, I believe, and she's going to tell all of the students in the VACO class from all over the county, from different boards, all about our funding formula. People are always asking about our funding formula. And so VACO sees a need to share that with the students in the VACO class, the supervisors. As a matter of fact, one of the students is sitting at the end over there, Mr. Radford, and he will be able to help out, I'm sure.
He will. About time he went to school.
But I do want to tell you that this was a very thorough and data-driven presentation on the state of the county budget. I've heard 9 of these, and they get better every year. And I would tell you that this one, you've reached the peak, so you're going to have to make it even better from now on out. The data was just, you're going to need time to sit down and look at the data and study it. It really speaks a lot of volumes. I want to thank the finance staff, too. Why don't you 4 ladies stand up down there, including Steve. Would you all stand up? Please stand up so we can give you a round of applause. They make Richard K. Wood look good, so thank you very much.
That's a hard job.
All right, so here's a couple concerns. First of all, I want to thank the schools for your cooperation with our county staff and Mr. K. Wood on the extra $3 million. You made things a lot palatable for the raises Richard talked about. And we appreciate that, and I want you to know that. If we hadn't gotten that kind of assistance, we'd have had to cut $3 million. And you know how much waste service is in Roanoke County? About $3 million. What a mess that would have been if we had to cut out our waste services. It would have been a disaster. I do want to emphasize this. I don't hope to see next year, in February 27th, what we all saw this year. And that was a big negative $1 million number. 3 days later, Mr. K. Wood began talking to the schools. So what I would like to emphasize proactively is that we start looking a few weeks into the year as time moves on and do an estimate of the 27 forecast, not the budget, but the forecast, which is the run rate, how things begin to look like they're going to occur. You never know what that could be like. They may not change a lot, but I would like to be more prepared to see those numbers, whether they're positive or negative, sooner rather than later. January would be appropriate, but I would like to start seeing this somewhere along the way. We do this for economic development. We have economic development closed sessions all the time. And so I think that's a small ask. And if this is difficult, then you can tell me about it in a sidebar later. But I don't mean to make your lives complicated. I mean for you all to make sure we're seeing some of the stuff and the trends before they become reality. Some factors impacting county budgets that I hear from VACO and I hear from in this room are the federal revenues from COVID. That started the trend. All that money began to come out of the federal government into the states, and it was just cash everywhere for any and everything. High inflation rates came out of those COVID days, and they're reflected in our real estate. Sometimes we had 12%, I think, assessments in some areas along the way. And it was based on the marketplace demand. There was no construction going on. People wanted houses. Prices went up. Inflation went up. And the trend was set in motion. CSA costs. Since I've been on this board in 2018, that has been the thing that sticks out the most. Is costing millions and millions of dollars, including private daycare. Collaboration with the schools, I hope, has a benefit for everybody. And I look forward to that. If we ever can find out if we're going to have a budget from the General Assembly, though, some of those items were addressed. The lower number of school students means less state dollars, it means less county dollars, and it means a less population of students. Higher insurance costs all over the state are impacting every county. It's impacting schools, it's impacting county government's software costs going off the radar screen. We need to collaborate on those two areas again, because only then can we get discounts through volume. And if we can do that, we need to do it. These are sweeping issues, as I said, all around the state and the county. Lower real estate assessments are occurring each year. Do you know our average this year was 6.72%? I did a calculation the other day, assuming everything stayed the same in terms of revenues and expenditures. And I said, oh, well, if it's 5.5% average, we're going to be in trouble next year. Okay? So, and someone said to me, well, I think it might be less than that. I said, well, I certainly hope not, because that's just going to exacerbate the problem. Now, here's some factors coming out of Richmond. Collective bargaining. Do you know how much that's going to impact Roanoke County if collective bargaining is signed as the bill has been submitted to the governor? If she signs that bill, it could maximize our impact on schools and county governments, $48.7 million. Now, folks, divide that by about 1.5 million, and that's how much tax rates would have to be considered in terms of revenues. We don't want to go there, trust me. Lower sales tax revenues. There's two indicators that folks on finance in Richmond watch. Lower sales tax revenues for the Commonwealth. We're seeing some of it here in Roanoke County today. And lower state withholding revenues. Because the lower the withholding revenues are, it's indicative that there's less people working in the workforce, especially in the Northern Virginia area, Tidewater and Richmond. High income taxes continue without higher standard deductions. So you'll look forward to getting a refund check in the fall probably this year, and that's the state's way of saying, here's some tax relief. I'm going to cash mine too, but the point is that those standard deductions are not giving you lower taxes throughout the year from your payroll checks. Thank goodness that this county, in the time when we had the revenue, cut our real estate tax 6 cents. We had to do it for our citizens that own homes. Okay? Did we cut them too much? Maybe. We certainly hope we don't have to touch that rate again. And that's why we need to work and come to the table. Like they used to say in typing class, now is the time for all good people to come to the aid of the country. Well, now is the time for all good people to come to the table and talk and work collaboratively. We're not exempt from these macroeconomic indicators that are impacting Roanoke County. They're impacting every state government surrounding us. Look what Montgomery County and Franklin County have done. Bedford County as well. It's been in the news a lot lately. Addressing these is nothing but good, collaborative, positive business and forecasting. The storm is coming, folks. Oil prices. I drive in a very small car with great efficiency, costing me $6 more every time I go to the gas pump. I can't imagine what it's costing the tractor-trailer drivers up and down 81, and those costs are going to be passed on to consumer goods, which are going to take more money out of all of our pockets. So I look forward to both staff, county and schools, and boards working to address all these issues. We appreciate the help so far. We appreciate the collaboration, and I'm glad we could help on Children's Services Act, and I hope that that does give us some benefit. The watchword is collaboration. We've got to have it. We're all facing these headwinds together. And so there are three things I'd like to just point out, Mr. Kaywood. First, job one, as I mentioned earlier, is to get closer to our numbers, and let's keep an eye on how they're trending throughout the year. The slides 10, 11, and 12 that were shared with the school chair last week by Chair Shepard, slides 10, 11, and 12 in the February 24th work session are what I like to see, because it's a quick glance that tells you how things are going. Secondly, I'd like to have a countywide capital funding discussion starting in June, thereabouts of this year, after the budget season's over, if not sooner. We cannot continue on the current pace. It is not sustainable. And lastly, I think we've already just about completed that, but a list of what we pay for and how it benefits the county and the schools has been created. It's been shared, and it's been updated since yesterday even. It started with Amy Whitaker. It started with Chair Shepard and I. It started with Lori Gerhardt. and Jessica Beamer and staff, and everyone has contributed to this list. It tells us that $266.9 million is the debt we owe in Roanoke County between schools and county borrowing. Folks, we can't keep going up no more. And that's going to be something we deal with in the future. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. North, thank you very much for that detailed summary. I knocked off about half my pages, but thank you. That was very, very concise.
Sorry.
So I'm just going to drill in just a couple of things. Right now, our capital funding formula with the schools is 20-20-20. So that means we borrow $20 million every 3 years. $40 million of it goes to the schools, $20 million goes to the county. That's what we're talking about that's unsustainable, because if we're borrowing $20 million, we're only paying back, I don't think we're paying back the whole $20 million from the last time that, if not, we're real close. So we're in the red on that type of borrowing. So, Mr. Kaywood, that's one of the things that you'll need to talk with the school board is how we're going to look at that funding model for years to come. We need to borrow every year, not every third year. And it's catching up with us, as you just stated. You stated that a pumper truck is close to $1 million now. That's about a cost of a 2,500 square foot house with a basement, 2-car garage that I'm building right now. And the problem is those prices are not coming down from COVID. They're not. Wood is coming down because it's a commodity like eggs, butter, milk. But the other products that we use to build a house are not coming down. And so I agree with Mr. North. You know, we're at a point where we need to do something. Mr. North mentioned collective bargaining. This is a state mandate that it's unfunded, so we have to create it. So how do we come up with that? And like what Mr. North said, is we'll have to end up increasing our tax rate. And that's not going to bode well for our community. I'm glad you brought up in detail, Mr. Kaywood, the revenue sharing formula to let the public see how we get into the weeds in that. And Ms. Shepard showed that to several of the school board members over a couple of meetings, and I was able to be in on one of them, and it was great to see how all that revenue was being shared. And you're right, as you summarized, we've got a combination of doing those 3 items to try to come up with how we're going to look down the road. So sounds like you got a little bit of work to do, Mr. Kaywood, but thank you so much for that presentation. I appreciate the notebook, all the slides. It really helped understand the picture for the budget. Thank you, Madam Chair.
No, I do want to speak. Okay, I was last, but that's fine. Go ahead. Okay.
Thank you, Richard. We really appreciated that presentation, and it was very informative. Appreciate my fellow board members and their comments. I feel like now it's on us. We've got to make the decisions now of what happens next. We've seen what the options are. We see what the issues before us are. We can't continue like we are. And so we've got to make some hard decisions going forward. I also have concerns about our debt model. I don't know that it's sustainable to continue to add that amount of debt every year. We need to seriously look at that on what our payback is and how we can go forward and meet our needs, but certainly not take on more than we can pay back. It's a concern. CSA is unsustainable. We can't go forward with this model as it is. I know that from talking to our fellow VACO members, that not everyone has the same problem that we do. This is a situation that's somewhat unique to our region. We don't have the vendors that some people in or some communities do, like in Northern Virginia or at the beach. It's just, we have limited number of vendors and the cost is escalating. I believe we increased $3 million in 3 years with 3 students. We've got to figure out some alternatives going forward. So to your point, Mr. North, we're going to need some collaboration. We'll continue to visit with our General Assembly members. We'll look at what our options are and what they can help us with, and being creative with those dollars from the state. As it is now, we are limited on how we can spend those CSA dollars. So we need some flexibility. I also want to give a shout out to Lori Gearhart. My goodness, she probably needs some overtime pay, Richard. And we take a lot of the responsibility for taking up your time, Lori, but you have been so valuable in meeting with us one-on-one, giving us the hard facts, and giving us history on some of these dollars. So we really appreciate all your work, Lori. Thank you. Thank you.
This is budget season. I think if we followed the media, we saw that our neighbors in Roanoke City had the same discussion yesterday. All of us have some light reading to do. But I think the more important message from the county administrator, and to be fair, Richard has been giving us that message over the past few years. Very bluntly, the path we are on is not sustainable. Unfortunately, too much of our system appears to be adversarial between Board of Supervisors and school board. It is not. The analogy I would use is we are on the same ship together.
Yes.
And we are handcuffed to the railing with the schools. And we have to come up with a better way of doing business. And I've talked a lot, and I bored all my colleagues on the board here, talking about what it costs to buy a fire engine, what it costs to buy a garbage truck, and we sort of separate it, and we say, oh, well, that's capital. Well, no, it's not. Capital is piece of providing services to our citizens. And I know in the budget we kind of divide capital from services, but as Mr. Kaywood has pointed out in his options, do we raise taxes? No, we don't want to do that. Do we want to cut services? No, we don't want to do that because our citizens have become comfortable with that. But garbage trucks and fire engines, i.e. the capital, the heavy equipment that is so expensive, is part of providing those services. That's a fundamental element to that. And I know for many of us, it's so easy to look at next year's budget. Well, as Mr. Kaywood points out, we have a courthouse that was built in the early, courthouse and jail that were built in the early 1980s. If you look around the Commonwealth of Virginia, other localities, cities and counties, are building new courthouses and new jails on a much earlier cycle than we are. If we're looking at a facility that's 45 years old, Montgomery County's built 2 courthouses since we built 1. I'm using that as an example. So even beyond what this year looks like or next year looks like, down the road, we have some other significant issues we have to deal with. Mr. North has gone through some of the issues that are coming out of Richmond. How those will evolve, I don't know. Maybe we'll know by the end of April. Maybe the Easter Bunny will tell us what our future is. But that will have significant impacts on all localities in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And that has the potential of adding significant costs to all localities in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so we're going to have some very difficult discussions among ourselves, among our elected colleagues on the school board, and how we go forward. And Richard has pointed out to us, it's not sustainable what we're doing. And we can't ignore and say, oh, well, we adopted a budget and we're okay for a year and everything is fine. So I'll look forward to reading this tonight. And hopefully I'll be able to send you some comments by the end of the week. Thank you.
Yeah, I got a follow-up comment. Paul, thank you. It reminded me. The capital that we're talking about, fire trucks and garbage trucks, we cannot borrow that money. We have to have cash, right, Lori? Yeah, she's shaking her head, yes. We have got to accumulate cash to replace that stuff.
You can, well, yes and no. I mean, you can do some limited, shorter-term borrowing for something like, say, a ladder truck or a fire truck that has a long, usable life. It's not going to be the normal 20-year cycle. So it's not that you're totally excluded from borrowing, but that is definitely correct with a lighter fleet. Things like probably an ambulance or your police car. So some of the heaviest things maybe, but it would be a very different structure than what we're doing now. So, and Lori, I don't know if you want to chime in on that at all.
Well, and you can do capital leases, but again, all you're doing is just increasing your debt.
Right.
Which we've all talked about, that
Right.
we need to kind of make sure that we're limiting. So, I mean, there are options, but you cannot do the traditional bond borrowing that we use our 2020 for.
Right. I got another
So
question,
that
so
kind of stuff would be.
come on up here, or get the mic.
Got the expert up here.
Yeah, so you were saying.
Yeah, so you can't use our traditional 2020 model borrowings to do those types of purchases.
Right.
So again, as Mr. Kaywood said, it's much shorter. You can do some capital leases, but you're increasing your debt ratio no matter how you look at it when you do those types of things. And our whole debt model is to maintain a certain ratio for our bond ratings and various things, and commitments, payments.
Right.
And I don't want to follow that up, though. The schools have the same problem. I mean, school buses are not as expensive as fire engines.
Right.
But school buses are very expensive. And the schools have to replace those on a regular basis. And God forbid you don't, and you have an accident, and you got 30 or 40 kids that are injured. So, like I said, we're all handcuffed to the same railing on the ship together.
Right, and another point, we've had critics of our board saying that the county is cash rich. I want to know where the cash is, okay?
I do too.
Thank you. Thank you. I do too. I want to know where all that cash is. And, I mean, we want to keep our AA bond rating, so we have to keep those fund balances at that level, correct?
Yes, we do. So we do have an unappropriated balance that we maintain. It's part of our comprehensive financial policy. We have it set at 12%, and it's 12% of our budget, so at $280, so it's about $32 million at the moment, but that is money that we cannot touch because, again, it's part of our policy. And when we talk to rating agencies, Fitch, Moody's, they really would like to see us have that at 20 to 25%.
Right.
So we're like scraping the barrel being at the 12%. So, we cannot touch that money because the second we start touching that money, it could very well affect our bond ratings.
Okay. And we like the higher bond rating.
Because we get the lower interest rate.
Right, lower interest rate, and we can help the schools, help the county
Yes.
with replacing facilities. Okay.
So one of the things I learned in one of our little tutoring sessions is that even CSA has its separate account, and we need 12% of that budget in reserve just to add up to
Right.
all that. So that's partly what is causing that big deficit number when we look at that for the proposed year. So we just have to keep all that in mind. It's partly our policy, but we have that policy for good reason. We need that good bond rating.
Right.
Thank you.
And something, I can't remember, Richard, if you touched on it, I think you did, but I just want to point it out, that was alarming to me the other day. Before this all began, a few months ago, we were looking at numbers, and we said we got $7 million that we pay for the debt. The debt bill is 11 million, we pay 7. The schools have 4 million from some other arrangements in past years. But that number's gone to 13 million. And the total number is 17 million. So we went from 11 million to 17 million.
Yes, sir.
And it was driven in large part because of the out of cycle, let's get those 3 projects done. And I'm glad we're getting them done. I mean, the 2 schools should have been done years ago. And
Yes.
the CTE, thank goodness, got done. And by the way, the Fed didn't cut that 6% rate the other day, and they're probably not going to as long as petroleum costs are still high. Inflation is going to be 3.5% at the end of this year, projections are, if the war continues, and maybe higher. So the 6% that we charge ourselves in the debt service model is not going to come down. And that means that with the increased debt I just referenced, the service the schools pay and that we pay is probably going to go up again at FY28. So no good deeds go unpunished, folks. Thank you.
Anybody else? I think it's my turn. Okay, so first of all, I want to throw out some thank yous. The last week, I've been kind of crunching some numbers in this budget process along with Laurie and Richard. And Laurie, thank you so much for being available with all my 500 questions. Richard, thank you as well. I met with the chair for the school board last week, Shelley, and I did give her some pages to look at and kind of where our numbers were coming in at. And I want to let the schools know we appreciate them working with us and helping with the $3 million and allowing us to give raises to our employees and everyone involved. And I've told several people, even though the school board is responsible for the teachers' raises and all the school employees, as much as I want to see them get them, my son is a teacher. I also, where they're in charge of the schools, we're in charge of the overall county. And I feel like we need to not only represent the fire department, the police, the general services, the parks, the librarians, everybody. We also need to overlook and see that the schools are also taken care of. So we have a lot more field to play in than the schools themselves. But I want to thank them for working with us on the $3 million. One thing that I wanted to point out, we keep talking about fire trucks, trash trucks, ambulances, but also thank you, Ashley, because I jumped on the horn with her and with Mark Tuck. We have, now correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, 26 SROs to cover the schools, which again is great, but along with those 26 SROs come 26 police vehicles, which in tune to, which most people don't understand, $72,000 each by the time they're upfitted. So that's another thing we're looking at, and I know that Richard mentioned that we need 12 new ones, so that kind of shows where our budget is. But again, I'm hoping that we can get with the schools. I wanted to thank Ryan White and David Linden for coming and going over the revenue sharing agreement and learning about all of that a couple weeks ago. And hopefully we're starting to all, like Paul said, work together and collaboratively so that we're not on a sinking ship together, handcuffed to it. So thank you all. I appreciate it. And if you all don't have any more comments.
Nope.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you. We'll move on to item D, briefing. Let's see, no, we're, E, sorry, that's what I was just looking at, E. Appointments. Do any board members have an appointment that has not been given to the clerk and included in the board report for agenda item E?
No.
Is there a motion to approve the list of appointments set forth in the board report?
Motion.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
No.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Radford?
Yes.
Mrs. Hooker?
Yes.
Mr. North?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mrs. Shepherd?
Yes. Item F, consent agenda. All matters listed under the consent agenda are considered by the board to be routine and will be enacted by one resolution in the form or forms listed below. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Does any board member wish to remove an item from the consent agenda for discussion?
Madam Chair, I do not want to remove an item from the consent agenda, but I'd like to ask a question, and I'm not sure who the question should be directed to, but specifically with item number 9 that talks about the grant for the juvenile community crime control process. When I read the agenda, it said we overspent last year by $27,300. How did we overspend? I thought we would stop things like that.
Well, we do give raises to there are some employees that are paid out of that grant. Unfortunately, that grant is level, and it's usually funded every 2 years. So for last year, they did give us, we applied for additional monies, and so they gave it to us. We saw that, we projected that, so we went to them and said, you know, based on this, we're going to have an overage of this amount. So they gave it to us.
So this was a catch-up?
So it was a catch-up.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
no, so that was for last year.
Okay, thank you. I would move the approval of consent agenda.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion?
No.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Radford?
Yes.
Mrs. Hooker?
Yes.
Mr. North?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mrs. Shepherd?
Yes. Item G, citizens' comments and communications. The time has been set aside for Roanoke County citizens to address the board on matters of interest or concern. Roanoke County citizens are defined as current residents of Roanoke County. While the board desires to hear from all who desire to speak, this agenda item is limited to a duration of 30 minutes. Each individual speaker shall be afforded 3 minutes to speak. Are there any citizens wanting to address the board that have not submitted a form?
No.
Okay. We'll move on to item H, reports. Is there a motion to receive and file the reports that have been included with the agenda under item H?
Move the
So
motion.
moved.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Radford?
Yes.
Mrs. Hooker?
Yes.
Mr. North?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mrs. Shepherd?
Yes. Item I, reports and inquiries of board members. Ms. Hooker?
Just a couple of items, Madam Chair. The first one is a big shout out to VDOT. We had a substantial bridge replacement on Fort Lewis Church Road. There was about a week where there was a lot of coordination for travel up to the bridge replacement, and then on the other side of the bridge for people to get to their homes. And so there was a lot of coordination for emergency services, for public safety in general, and the schools were helping us with parking in their parking lots, and they expected this to last about a week. They got it done in a day. And so big shout out to VDOT. Thank you so much. There was a lot of angst in the community over all of that. It needed to be done. We needed the bridge replaced, but VDOT was especially efficient on that, and I really appreciate that. And then just another shout out to M. Portner, thank you so much for all you've done to help get the good work out about Roanoke County. We appreciate you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Mahoney?
One item, Madam Chairman, just a thank you, a public thank you to Mr. Ellerman. Mr. Ellerman is the principal involved with Old Orchard Farm LLC, which was item F4 on our agenda. That will be coming up for a public hearing before the board at the end of April. Mr. Ellerman spent about an hour, hour and a half with Ms. Hooker and I, and showed us his property and described to us his application. It is a fairly significant land use matter that will be coming before the board next month. It involves 250 acres in Mr. North's district, but I want to thank Mr. Ellerman for taking the time to show us the property. That's all.
Okay. Mr. Radford?
Yeah, I've got one item. I am still getting calls and requests and conversations from our citizens about the redistricting vote that's going on right now. And so I'll try to be a little more precisely about it. But in 2020, 65% of us Virginians across party lines agreed and approved the creation of a nonpartisan redistricting commission. And so what's rooted in that is that politicians shouldn't choose their voters. Voters should choose their representatives. So this map that we've seen many times basically gives one party a 10-to-1 advantage, and they're saying that's fair. Well, it's not fair, folks. I don't know how you can term that. So I've been trying to explain to the county residents that I have conversations with about, what we need as far as Roanoke County. And we need rural representation. And having 4 of those districts come out of Fairfax trying to tell us what we need in Roanoke County is not fair. And it will impact us for 4 years. And Mr. North and I sit on a transportation committee that gets federal funds for that representative. And so do you think they're going to care about Roanoke County and those federal funds? It's going to be a hard sell to try to get them to continue funding road projects like I-81 and other stuff. So it's not fair. Go do your research. I'm going to vote no myself personally. So, Madam Chair, that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. North.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll try to make this brief. I didn't do much else the last 2 weeks, but think about what we talked about today and what Mr. Kaywood presented today. And Tammy and I and others have talked. This is serious stuff. I mean, I sat down on Sunday a week ago and spent the better part of the afternoon thinking about all this. So I didn't take it lightly, and I won't take it lightly. And I want to see us succeed, and we're going to succeed. Speaking of transportation, I just read an article before I came down here. Unbelievable. I got to go back and reread it again and share it with the TPO. We've been named the #1 state for transportation in the country. Well, I think that's great, but I thought other states were. So we're going to find out more on that, Mr. Radford, and talk about that Thursday at the TPO meeting. That's all I have. Thank you.
I do not have a whole lot this week. There were just a couple items I wanted to mention. On Wednesday, March 18th, we went to the Salem-Roanoke County Chamber Awards Banquet, and I just wanted to congratulate Natalie Maxey for winning Police Officer of the Year and Lieutenant Caitlin Ward for winning First Responder of the Year. We are proud of both of them, and I want to personally thank them both for their service and all of their hard work. And then one last item, and I'm going to steal this out of Martha's district, is I wanted to remind everyone that Roanoke County's 3rd annual Easter extravaganza is being held at Green Hill Park on March the 28th. And the egg hunt for ages 5 and older is at 11 a.m. and the egg hunt for ages 4 and under is at 11:30 a.m. And it's my understanding they're going to have the egg hunt, a touch-a-truck, and several vendors there. And I wanted to thank our libraries, our first responder departments, and our social services department for putting that on. And other than that, that is all that I've got. So we will move on to item J, work session, joint work session with the South Peak Community Development Authority, CDA Board of Directors. Momentarily, the board will recess to the 3rd floor for the work session. However, before doing so, I would like to move that the board go into closed session upon the completion of the work session. Item K, closed meeting. I move to go into closed session pursuant to Code Section 2.2-3711A5 of the Code of Virginia for discussion concerning a prospective business or industry or the expansion of an existing business or industry where no previous announcement has been made of the business or industry's interest in locating or expanding its facilities in the community. Specifically, the board will discuss potential business location or expansion in the 5 magisterial districts. Is there a second?
Second.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Radford?
Yes.
Mrs. Hooker?
Yes.
Mr. North?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mrs. Shepherd?
Yes. Will we,
Yes, Madam Chair, to give you an update, unfortunately, I've heard nothing from our wayward traveler, so I don't know if that's good news or bad news. I do know some of the members of the media would probably like to speak to me and a few of you, so what I would recommend is that we plan on doing our closed meeting, say, maybe start around 4:15 on the 4th floor, and then hopefully I will hear something, and then we'll do the work session. The work session doesn't have a lot of county staff, so we won't have to keep a huge amount of people around for that, but I think that's better until we have some information from Municap. So,
Okay.
but I would recommend we do closed first.
all right, thank you.